Right, John and Keith, great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us today for a little look back, trip down memory lane. We're going to start off, if it's okay, John, because obviously we'll come on to the big summer signing in 2004 in a minute, which was Keith. But you took over in November '03, and I think you've just been part of a Wolves team that got to the Premier League under Mark McGee the year before, hadn't you? And had a good time there. I'd just be interested to get your thoughts on why Dave Jones. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'd just be interested to get your thoughts on why you decided it was, time. What appealed to you about Cheltenham? Because it was in a difficult position when you came in, wasn't it?
Yeah, and to be very basic about it, I wanted to get back in the game. And when you're a manager, and I don't mind coaching and working different things, which I did at Wolves. I didn't manage Wolves. I worked there for 5 years coaching and thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a couple of managerial opportunities then and said, no, I'm really liking this, it's good. So it was a question of saying, right, I want to get back in, how am I going to do this? And jobs came up and I got an interview, and it was away from Cheltenham. We had a good chat about things. I think it was a Tuesday night, and I was going to stop at Kidderminster on the way back and watch a game. And they asked me that, what are you doing now? So I'm going to go home, but I'm going to watch a game on the way. And while I was actually on the way and at the game, they phoned me and offered me the job. So the interview went really well, obviously. So I went, right, that's good. Back in the game, let's get on with it, get the boots on and go to work. So sometimes, with great respect to any club, sometimes managers out of the game can't pick and choose where they want to be and what they want to do. But it was available. I applied and passed the interview, which was great.
Yeah, I think your first game was a 3-1 win over Hull in the FA Cup, which was a great start. And then I'm sure you already knew a bit about the squad, but one thing I think you definitely did that summer when Keith came in was you went for a lot younger squad, didn't you? I think there's some good older guard players in there. People like Bob Taylor and Mark Yates, and you must have had to make some difficult decisions there because you did go a lot younger, didn't you? As that season progressed.
Yeah, I did, and we had a lot of guys that played in midfield as well, and of a certain age, and that's nothing to do with it. But we were, I think we were struggling away second bottom something when I came in, and it was a question of, right, we've got to get out of this first of all and then see if we can build. And it was a question of, let's go to games and not get beat. And I remember Keith ringing me and saying, what you got tomorrow? How are you going to play tomorrow? Well, we'll probably play a bit defensive, Keith, right? See if you get another draw, get another point. And then he would ring me on the Saturday or the Sunday saying, good point, that Wardy. Yeah, fine, thanks very much. And it was a kind of running thing between Keith and I, although he wasn't with me at the time. But it was, right, what am I going to do? How am I going to get this result? And that first result was without 4 or 5 players who had been injured at the time, people like John Finnegan, I think, good players. And then, interestingly enough, over the next week after we'd won that game, the physio produced some absolute miracles because they all got fit for the next game. But that's what happens at football clubs. And we started to get some experience a lot of experience in the club, but it needed to be readjusted at the end of the season. But we needed to get safe first. And to be fair to those lads, it wasn't about they hadn't done the job, because they'd done a great job to make sure that we were ready to rebuild. And unfortunately, at their expense, because they had to leave the club.
Yeah, there's just a couple of games I want to mention before we move on to the Ward Downing era in earnest. You've picked out a couple of times when I've spoken to you in the past the 0-0 draw against Huddersfield, where you sort of came off thinking we got a bit of grit and determination here, and also the Fulham game was quite an exciting one for you to have early on in your reign, wasn't it? To go there in the FA Cup with a full strength team, and Fulham were going well in the Premier League at the time.
Yeah, the Huddersfield game stands out because we nearly won it, and I say that because we had a chance and we to get a goal and get something out of it, but we dug in against a good side in a good ground that you can be overawed at, a nice stadium and a bigger club than ourselves. It's fair to say, but we stuck in and we got a point. And I remember coming in after the game, the lads they were like cheering and celebrating as if we'd won the FA Cup, really. They were like really excited with themselves and we'd achieved something. And whilst I didn't want to knock that back at them and say, come on, that's just a point away from home, it was a massive situation. It was a big point away from home at a big club and laid down, as you say, that foundation for that group. And us at the time said, we can actually do this. and give us that confidence that we can get something out of it. And with a little bit more luck, I'm not saying we deserve to win the game by any chance, but with a bit of luck, we could have pinched a goal and gone and won the game. But that really, for me, that set the foundation, and I think it set the belief that the lads were better than our league position showed us, and we went on and finished in a very reasonable 14th position, and that proved the point. Fulham was a big test, and as you can imagine, you know, I went. Funnily enough, you don't know this story, but I went into Fulham. We got off the bus and I went into the ground, and I left my kit bag on the bus, and I watched the game in my suit and my tie. The only time I'd ever done that. And they all thought it was because we got a big game away from home, and I was giving it the big look at me. And I'd left my bag on the bus. We jumped off, and then I went, and the bus went off and parked somewhere else, and I couldn't find my kit. So anyway, that's just something else. So just daft little things, but big things in terms of the game. And we did well within those 2 football matches for people to believe that they could be better than they were, or than we were at that time. As I say, and, you know, get to the point where they could achieve what they were good enough at doing.
Yeah. So summer of your first full season in charge. We'll introduce Keith here because he brought in a few players such as Steve Guinan, Ashley Vincent, Gavin Keynes. I think Scott Brown came in there, the young keeper, and it was starting to take shape. Keith, what do you remember about? You know, we were chatting as you sort of logged in that you got to know John a little bit around the training ground at Wolves, and you know became good friends. But he wanted to give you the job not just because you were mates; it was because you were, you know, he liked you as a coach. So, what are your memories about that discussion you had about actually coming to Cheltenham?
Yeah, first and foremost, the relationship was really key for me when I was at Wolves working with John. I was at the youth team, and John was senior level, so we struck up a good relationship straight away. I liked the way John worked, and very respectful of that. So straight away, it was that relationship that was the key. And when John asked me in the summer, ironically, actually, I don't know if John remembered it, but I actually had a chance to go to Leeds with Kevin Blackwell. And I sort of went up there for a day to have a look around Thorpe Arch, and then I saw John about a day or two later, and there was a decision to make. And obviously, people were saying, "Well, Cheltenham and Leeds, there's no comparison. What are you going to do?" And just the way John sold the dream, really, and sold the fact that we'd be working together, lots of coaching. So I think 3 years, wasn't it, John? I know that. Not worth the paper it's written on, but it was 3 years to say, look, we can build this club, and you know you can be really part of it. So that was that was the sort of the decision I made. I thought this is going to be great. So and I've got to say it was probably the best 5 years in terms of learning from John, because no matter what you think, it's not just about the coaching; it's about dealing with people. And John gave me a real patience and a long-term thinking. I was always typical young coaches. We can change things immediately, and you know, John always had that patience of always being level, never got too low, never got too high, and just always had a direction in which I learnt a great deal from. So it was great learning for me, part of my career anyway.
Yeah, when you look back at that first season, it was very stable between 04 and 05 and 05-06. It was virtually the same squad with just Craig Armstrong coming in. But because you had quite a few changes that summer, including a new assistant manager and basically half a new team, was 14th. Was that okay, John, in your first season, do you think? Because even though people might look back and think, well, we just came 14th, considering the amount of changes that had happened, was that a decent sort of stable base for you to work from?
It was. There was some disappointment on my behalf that we hadn't improved on that. But when I look back at it now, certainly at the time I felt the same way. We'd finished 14th from being second bottom and sort of getting out of the way of being relegated out of the Football League altogether, which was a great effort from everybody. And then to stabilise it, like we say, with all the changes that we had to make and the situation we were going through. I remember, who did I speak to some years ago, and they said about going into a job, don't be too successful too soon. And I went, okay. But the second 14th finish was a more stable worked at position, if you see what I mean. The first one was, we've got to get out of this, we've got to get out of the bottom. And Keith would say, keep smiling here, we've got a draw here, got a point there, pinch this, or pinch that, we've done this, we've done that. And then the second one was right, developing and working. And that's what I said when we signed people like Michael Townsend, Ashley Vincent, we offered them 2-year deals from the age of 18 and stuff like that. So right, their first sort of pro contract. And instead of giving a 1 year, we'll see how you get on, and if it doesn't work, we can move them out and get someone else in. We made a point. Keith is a very good coach and wanted to coach and wanted to be on the pitch every day, as I did. But my situation took me away different times because you're managing and got to organise different things. But Keith was coming in to coach and work hard with these boys. Knew some of them as well because they'd been through him before. But we worked it together to get that. And 14th was a more stable position than the first one, if you see what I mean. That we'd worked hard to get that right. Now, what can we do the next time around? And we were fortunate because we were at a club with the chairman and with people around us that were seeing the same things as us. Right, okay, they've done that, they've done this, now we'll try and help them move on. And I had a chairman and a group of staff as well, and the groundsman, the kit managers, the physio, everybody was pulling in the same direction, which was brilliant. And we developed that, Keith, didn't we? It was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Great atmosphere. Great to come in every day and work. And I think just going on to John's thing, the first year was, John full mentioned about the Ashley Vincents and the Gavin Kanes, and then all these guys were sort of, I wouldn't say failures, but sort of didn't quite make their level wherever they were, Walsall and JJ Milligan, of course, at Wolves as well. So just trying to establish themselves into a Football League career, and it was their first year, of course, to do that alongside with some of the experience that John kept. But it was a learning curve for them as well to get themselves acclimatised to league football. So I think there were some ups and downs. I remember one day we sat in, I don't know if John remember this, when we sat and I think we were having a bag of chips, we were doing some reserve game. I think Bobby Bloom had taken the reserve game, and we sat there with a sandwich or a bag of chips on the way home, and I don't think we'd won in about 8-9 games, and we just sort of sat there and chewed the fat sort of thing, and just, I remember just vividly talking about the season. And obviously John had a bit more aspirations to get a bit higher, but I think in the end it was proved as it was, it established and gave a good foundation for what was to come.
Yeah, we'll go on to talk about some of the really great bits of businesses you helped do for the club in terms of bringing players in, developing them, and then going on for a big profit. But I think people sometimes forget you lost Michael Duff at the end of that first season, John, before Keith came in, and then at the end of the first season, Martin Devaney moved on. So you'd lost two. They'd been big players for a number of years, but Craig Armstrong came in, and obviously he was the key for going from 14th to but
has he told you that?
Yeah, he always likes to claim that one. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the only player that played, all the time. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he will tell you that, Craig.
Let's talk about the 05-06 season, because it was probably a pleasant surprise for the fans, really, to go from 14th to a team finishing and winning the playoffs.
Yeah.
With very little, but a hell of a lot of hard work behind the scenes, but very little in the way of new signings. So, first of all, what was it about Craig Armstrong that that appealed to you about him that summer? I think, did you work with him before?
Yeah, I knew him. Yeah, we'd done some bits together, and he was one of those players you'd seen as I'd gone around doing my rounds and stuff like that. And he got some good experience and been at a higher level, and had come through. And I'd seen him work, and I thought, you know what, if I can get him, and I had to persuade him. I had to really work hard at getting him. And I know he tells a story that when we'd got the draw at home to Wickham in the playoffs, I went to him and said, "Come on, we're nearly there now. This is what I said to you." And I sort of said to him, "Look, I think we can do this. I think we can push this together as a team and as a club." And that was my sort of selling point. And just before I knew that we could, so I was kind of working on it, and he came on that basis. And he was very good, very close with John Finnegan as well, and they knew each other, and he got the good word off Finners, which was great. So. He came in. We sold it to him on the basis that he wanted to play higher, and I sold him it on the basis that if we do well here, you can play higher. And he came in, and we did it. And But he was good lad, great around the club, funny character, but good humour, and very serious about his football, but helped the group in a lot of ways. He had some good experience of being around the place. Good for us. Enjoyed him, Keith, didn't you?
Yeah, no, he was good. But there was a lot of good pros, John Finnegan, Stevie Guinan. You know, that they were really good around the place, really good, solid citizens that every day they came and worked really hard, and they were good for the youngsters then, the likes of Andy Gallen and Michael Wilde and Adam Connolly coming through the ranks, and lots of really good atmosphere. You know, they were bought into everything that John had sort of envisaged for them and tried to set up the system for. So it was a great, as I said before, it was great coming in, great to have a real attitude of these boys to work hard every day, and that's what they did. It wasn't the success was really built on the hard work and the foundation that John put in. The boys really responded.
A lot of players came into their own that season, but Coyote had only got one goal the previous year, and that was on the first day of the season at Southend. I think JJ scored on his debut as well that day. And I remember there was a bit of a sort of rumbling from the fans to, get rid of him, or he wasn't good enough. And then he was one of the ones, along with a lot of others, who really came into their own that season, didn't he? And it wasn't long before you were selling him on to Barnsley at the end of the League One season for 200 grand, I think he went for. So what did you two see in him? I mean, he's obviously lightning quick and a powerful lad, but why did you persist with him after he did struggle a little bit in those early days?
Go on, Keith. Want to go with that one?
What did we see in him? Well, I mean, for the size of him, I mean, he was athletic. He had a very good touch as well, back to goal. And I think, really more with Kay, it was probably self-belief, a little bit of confidence really that Kay needed. We worked really hard on his game, on his finishing. He wasn't the most natural finisher. I'm sure he'd agree with that. But in fairness, again, his attitude to the work and to try and get better was good. And I think going alongside with Kay, you had Spence, you had Steve Gillespie, you had Steve Guinan. There were four what we call probably different types of players. So John, would sometimes play, Kay and Spence together, or Stephen, the two Stephens together. And they were sort of gave the defence some different problems. And I think they were always, I mean, we talk about them probably as individuals, but as a four, I think that was probably the key to playing 50, 60 games that season. And John could rely on all of them. I mean, Spence, I think, probably covered every appearance. I think he came off the bench and was a real handful by doing that. So, there were a variety of types of strengths that these players had, and I think they gave the defence various problems from that. And Kay was, he had it in him. I just think probably mentally and lack of self-belief that, he needed to obviously do it for himself, really.
Let's have a little chat about. That's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, and it proved to be a great decision because some managers might have run out of patience after one goal in the season, but you saw something in him, and he wasn't the only one who repaid you that season because we were chatting a bit about Brian Wilson. He come in on loan, hadn't he? And he got Player of the Year that year. Yeah,
I'm just going back to Kay. I remember standing or calling him and Damien Spencer across to me on the training pitch, and they stood in front of me, and I was looking up at the both of them, and they're like massive guys, lovely people, but and I'm looking up and I said, why aren't you two in my team? Why aren't you two my centre forwards? And I remember saying it like that, and they're looking at me saying, is he winding me up? What's he asking me to say here? And I just look, and I look at you. You've both got pace. You've both got power. I'd hate playing against you every week. And I don't know whether that rung a bell or got them to, but I think prior to that, I knew at 3:15 on a Saturday afternoon if Coyote was going to have a good game or not. And by looking at his first 15 minutes, because he just needed, as Keith said, that confidence and that if he had a good start, didn't have to score a goal, but if he had a good start and did something and powered on past the strike, you go on then, off you go. And Spence, as I say, I think he took every one of the 60-odd games in the promotions. He was on the bench in the team. Imagine him coming on, at 4:30 when you're 2-0 down, and he's going to run at you and power past you and do things. And he was a great guy to have in the football club. And and at the risk of belittling him, and I wouldn't do that at all, but he was a good sub for that reason at all, because he would come on and put probably an hour's work into 25 minutes, which was fantastic for the team and helped us win games, because you sometimes, if you're 2-0 up, you can go, well, let's keep this, let's look after it. Put Damien Spencer on, you got a chance of winning 3-0 or 4-0, because he wanted to get a goal, and the team knew how to play him in. So they were two really good lads, and played a massive part in what we did.
There's some famous sort of TV pictures, I think, photos of you gathered in the bungalow ready for the FA Cup draw. And Steve Guinan told the story that he was sort of celebrated when the draw came out against Newcastle, and he told everyone to stay calm and everything. But I mean, a bit different, but how important was that bungalow for you as a group? Because you had your staff very close in a room, and it was a great place for the players to go and gather after training, wasn't it? I remember some great atmosphere in there after training every day.
Yeah, go on, Keith.
Well, I mean, originally it was derelict, you see, and I'm not quite sure we had the chance to use it, but at some point in time there was an availability to it. So I had an actual friend of mine who built kitchens and things. So I went up to him, one of his showrooms, and said, look, have you got any used kitchens or ones that have been on the show, So he said, yeah. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll come down and fit it for you. So anyway, one of the days he came in, fitted it in. We got a few settees and an old TV, dartboard, of course. And yeah, it just provided a fantastic... See, what happened in those days is that guys would train and then go home. And then they'd probably go into the garage and probably wouldn't eat right. So, you go and get a bag of crisps or something from the petrol station. So I think there was a thought, probably a bit of nutrition. We're working hard. Let's try and get the right food in them. So this kitchen obviously provided that with the cooker and things like that. And, and I think, was Doreen about, John? Doreen?
Yes.
Yeah, Doreen. So Doreen was fantastic for the club, lifelong supporter. She called it, her babies, and she'd come and look after and do the lasagna or do a pasta dish or something. And the guys sat around, and it became a hub. And you've ended up 3-4 o'clock and no one leaving. It was, and there's a darts competition, and it just built a fantastic atmosphere within the club. And then of course the staff as well. We used it just prior to the training sessions, and that was great as well. Everybody part of the club, as John mentioned, from Bobby Bloom and Mike Heather, John Atkinson, Terry the groundsman, and it was just a real great meeting place in the morning. And it was kind of, I always think, I always use this as well in my thing. It was kind of like a meeting place without being official. We'd sit around and chat, and I always found that was an informal meeting place, what was going ahead, with the next day ahead, or what was going on into training, and just a real nice, simplistic way of doing it. And it built such a great atmosphere of the football club. Loved it. Couldn't wait to get in. Every morning I woke up, I drove in, apart from Bob smashing my car in the car park, but it was great. Really good fun.
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
So,
yeah.
I've just got to. We've got to have a little chat about the FA Cup that season, because you really had to do it the hard way. Oxford in the second round, after getting through Carlisle, needed a replay, and I think Brian got the winner at Oxford. And then the second leg at Chester, I remember the first leg at Chester, Shane Higgs was injured, so Scott Brown came in and did a good job. I think it was his debut. And then going to Chester, knowing that the winners played Newcastle, that was a different type of pressure from a league game, but the fans travelled in their numbers, didn't they? And that was a great night with KOD getting the winner. Yeah,
and what? So, as you think about it, sometimes it's probably more pressure to the opponents, because they're at home, they're expected to win, as we would have been had it been the other way around, and take the game on. But when your opponents before you've actually got the result, then that can be really edgy, and that's what we knew. We all knew, obviously, that if we did it right, we could do it. But we knew we could win. That's what I said about the confidence about the group at that particular time was growing. And we thought, okay, that's fine. We can go and do this. And, we talked about the pressure being on the home team, because they would expect to win because they're at home, and then they would get the cup draw. So I said, well, what about us? Well, we can't, we can get the cup draw. We go and win and we do it right. We can do that. And I'm not saying we fully deserved it, but we went with a confidence and a thought pattern. So yeah, we can do this, and that sort of was really important to the group and to the team, and obviously it added to the season that we had. And the next game to see Graham Souness come with his boys and Alan Shearer and people like that was fantastic reward for everybody at the football club. It was brilliant.
Yeah, Keith, what are your memories of that? We'll get the Newcastle game. Early kickoff on a Saturday, live on BBC, 7,000 in the ground. As John said, Shearer, and a full strength team. What was that like for you on the touchline? As in your second season, at the club?
Really exciting, and I think it was more excitement rather than trepidation. I think, as John said, we actually, I wouldn't say we fancied ourselves. We knew that if Newcastle had played to their potential, they would win. But obviously, the tightness of the ground, full house, great atmosphere. The cameras there. It was just obviously the players being able to handle that sort of occasion. And in all fairness, I thought there was moments of that game where we got on top. Obviously, in those situations, you need to score. But I thought we gave a really good run for the money, really, and it was something to be proud of for the whole club. And I think it actually set us up to kick on for the next part of the season. I think we were still in the Football League trophy, still went into. I think he ended up at Colchester in the area final. So we had lots of games coming. And as John said, it was just like kind of momentum was building, which we just let it run, and it was nice. Admittedly, it was quite a hard workload, but the games took care of themselves. You were running into the next game, and I just thought it was a big impetus for us to kick on that season. And obviously, I think the players playing in front of that have wanted a little bit more as well. I think.
Graham Souness, asked if he could come down on the Thursday and see the ground and see the stadium because they'd not been before. Graham was under pressure from the press. We had to give up one of our rooms at the club to about 40 press people who came to see his last game as Newcastle United manager and get beat by this little club. But the whole feeling about it was he was actually extremely professional. He brought his team to look at our ground on the Thursday afternoon. They walked around the pitch. They saw the size of the dressing room, which was minimal to them. They'd got, I don't know how many bags of kit and stuff outside in the corridor. And they paid us massive respect, which I was really, really pleased about. And Graham Souness was an absolute gentleman, as was Alan Shearer. I think he gave one of our lads his shirt at the end of the game. And they treated us with massive respect, which I think is fantastic. And we took a lot from that whole day. My memory of it is getting into the ground at about 9 o'clock in the morning. There'd been a sharp frost, I think. Pitch was actually okay because we'd covered it up. And two of our directors were drinking a glass of champagne on the terraces, just looking at the pitch and thinking, what a day this is. And it's like just 9:30 on a Saturday morning. And you think, wow. And I just remember looking at them thinking, done well for them. Yeah, we've done well for these guys because they've been at the club a long time, these directors. And this was their reward day, if you see what I mean. This was their day to enjoy it, and a glass of champagne at 9:30 on a cold and frosty Saturday morning was great for them, and it brought a smile to my face to see them enjoying themselves. So, but that's what we were, Keith, wasn't it? That's we were very much together as a group, board of directors as well, which was nice.
Yeah.
And as Keith said, you probably kicked on from there second half of the season. Brian Wilson was scoring for fun from the left wing, so I think you signed him as a right back, and he did very well in a different position, didn't he? And we've got to give Jerry Gill a mention because he was one of the few older statesmen in that team, and it's probably his form at right back, wasn't it, that allowed Brian to go and play left wing and do so well there.
Yeah, well, Jerry had come into the club, and I think he'd actually made a decision that he was going to retire from the game, or he had retired from the game. I can't remember if he had, and he said, can I come and join in training? And I went, yeah, you come and join in training. I said, then he played a couple of reserve games, I think. We thought, he's not bad, Jerry. And I went, do you want to stay a bit, Jerry? And I can't pay you. I can maybe give you a little bit of money. And he went, yeah, I'll do that. I can do that. It wasn't the money he was after. It was the playing the game of football again. And that situation just built with Jerry. And not only was that football-wise, but as a person as well. he was the absolute most genuine person and cared about the club, wanted to do something, and then got involved in what we were doing as well as what he wanted to do, and it just built on from there. Jerry was a very important part of that group, like you say, and was kept his side, kept his place in the team as well, which was to his great credit, because sometime before that he was thinking he's having to come off the game and not play again.
Yeah, I mean, he looked after the dressing room, didn't he, John,
Yeah,
as well? You know,
yeah.
he was sort of the continuation of the staff, really, Jerry, really important member. And I even remember my days when I was managing there, Jerry was an important member of that, you know, to continue to support. Really valued member and an important person.
I think this photo behind me is actually the Notts County game. I think it's when the day you guaranteed the playoff place on the penultimate weekend with it. And Keith, I think you got covered in water, didn't you, by one of the players?
Yeah.
But, you know, a memorable day, and he still had one game left. And we spoke about this with Steve Guyn and Craig Armstrong, John Finnegan. You went to Mansfield on the last day and thrashed them 5-0, having changed half the team round. Did that, as the guy said, did that give you a lot of problems in terms of, or a nice problem in a way, of who you're going to pick for the playoffs?
I'll comment. No, not to me. It didn't. I remember. I think it was Keith. I said this to us. You know what, Keith? We can't stop this if we want to. I don't know what to do to stop it in terms of the momentum that was within the football club. I mean, David Bird had played 125 games for the club and never scored a goal. Guess what happened on that day? He went to Mansfield and he scored his first goal of his career. There's so many things here that, you know, where did you ever go and win 5-0? You know, whoever you are, and that was a fantastic display, and a really carefree display by the boys. And I know that some of the guys who didn't play, maybe John Finnegan, Grant McCann, maybe it just made them sit up a little bit as well. Wow, but it didn't really change my view, and I think Keith's view of where we thought we were going to play the next games, and we just wanted people to get through injury free. I think, Keith, first of all, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just make sure we've got the choices when we now, you know, we're going into these playoff matches, and but to go in with a result like that was fantastic. And just remember sort of shaking my head and going, wow, what's going on? You know, we what have we done here? You know, and I knew what we'd done, but it was beyond my expectations, and I think probably Keith felt the same. Gosh, this is quite a surprise, but let's enjoy it while it's happening.
Yep. I mean, we went on then to the Wycombe game, was it?
Yeah.
Which I ironically, actually, I don't know what John's view was. I thought, you know, Wycombe were probably the best footballing team of the season. Really, they had some massive threats. I think I'm just trying to remember some names. That the chap up front who was scoring, Tommy Moody, Tommy, massive handful. And then you had Kevin Betsy and Sender, was it, down the right hand side?
Good players
for the level, and you know, that was I think, you know, looking at that, they were two of the most solid performances I think that we produced away and at home of the season. You know, really watertight, didn't give a lot away. I remember not having much of the ball, particularly at Whaddon Road at the second leg, but a real good defensive display from front to back. And that was always our foundation, John, wasn't it? You know, it was that solidity to start with. Played really well away from home, actually. He's got the couple of goals, and but the home game, I remember a dogged performance, really, but, you know, very professional. And I think that was a real massive. I mean, John says we were going into some momentum there, and it wasn't going to stop. And Wycombe had been there for so long, I think, at the top, and then sort of I think they lost the last few games just to drop out of the automatic promotion. So they were probably going the other way a little bit in terms of confidence. But that really sticks in my mind, probably more so than the final. You know, I just thought that those two matches were a real key point to the season, because we probably weren't expecting, certainly weren't favourites to go and win over two games. You know, you might get the one odd, you know, but over 180 minutes, they were probably thinking they'll have enough too much for us. But credit to the boys, they put two real sterling performances in.
Yeah, I think Keynes and Duff were particularly well. Everyone was solid in the second leg, but Keynes and Duff particularly up against people like Tommy Mooney and the left side.
Yeah.
Armstrong and Wilson did a good job on those two players you mentioned, Keith, didn't they?
Yeah.
Betsy, I think, is Betsy involved with the England's?
He is actually. Yeah, he mentions that. Yeah,
well.
he mentions it a lot. Yeah, the final.
Does-
yeah,
Do you mention it a lot?
I
Yeah, I was
mention
going
it more than
to
he
get
does. You know. Yeah.
Good on you, mate.
Yeah. I actually tried to sign him, John. Tried to sign Kevin about 2 seasons later when you'd gone.
All right.
I met him at a hotel about 10:30 in the evening. You know what you used to do, and in the end he turned me down. But he likes to mention that as well. So
yeah, good lad. He was all right. Good player, wasn't he?
Yeah, good player, Kev.
Yeah.
So brilliant achievement to get through. As you said, I think Wickham were probably fancied. As you know, Cheltenham probably weren't fancied by many to get to the final, let alone win it. But you know, you mentioned Graham Souness doing things properly before the cup tie. John and Keith, you took your lads to the Millennium, didn't you, in the build-up? How important was that, you know, because it was a imposing stadium, you know, massive, great stadium, wasn't it, to play at? And a lot of the lads probably wouldn't have seen it before. So what do you remember about that midweek trip, and how important do you think that was?
From my point of view, it was vital. They're really, really important. And I was lucky enough to get there with Wolves to the playoff final, and we played Sheffield United, and they turned up on the morning of the game, looked around like they were the visitors to Paris or London or whatever. So, wow, this is great, that's great. We were putting the kit out. We had no players there because they wanted to win the game, and we won it. Now, going back with us, I learned from that we didn't want to be the guys that suddenly went there and said, oh, look at how big this is great, never played in. We went on the Wednesday or the Tuesday, Keith, didn't we, to have a look at it?
Wednesday, I think, yeah.
Wednesday, and we said, right, let's get that out of the way. Let's go and have a day down in Cardiff. We're just going to, what we're going to do now, we're not going to train, we're just going to look, we're going to do this. And we did exactly that. We just walked around, went in the dressing rooms. We'd asked permission, of course, we didn't just turn up, but we walked around the place and we checked the dressing rooms out, which one will we have, what went back, what might it be like. It wasn't a very good pitch, actually, was it? It was a poor pitch. But we found all that out, so that on the match day, the idea was that wouldn't be the important factor, or looking around how big the stands were and who could they see their mum and dad and things like that. That bit was okay, but we didn't need to be overawed by the situation, and it did all right for us, because I don't think the lads were too busy looking around thinking, I've never been here before, I wonder if I'll ever play here again, that kind of thing. So that's things you learn as you go along, and that was something I'd learned previously, and so let's do that. So that plus it takes up one of the days while you're waiting to play the game, because there's a long gap between getting there and actually playing there. You know, winning your semi-final and then playing in the final itself. So we had to fill those days in as well.
And the boys was taking all their pictures and things, so you know they got all that stuff out of the way, you know, and actually turning up on the day. And one actually thing that Wezzo in Weston had picked up in terms of warm-ups. So because it was slightly different on warm-up time, you had to come off at a certain time. Usually you went through to 2:45, 3:45, but you had to be off by something like 2:25 or 2:30 even. So, you know, Wezzo had sort of picked it up and said, hang on, we're going to have to change, you know, if we'd have turned up. And actually, ironically, you know, not giving Grimsby a disservice, but they sort of got caught out by it, and we were just away, just finishing off, and they were sort of hurrying through their warm-up. Not saying it made us win, but it was another, you know, preparation that we were actually ready for. So, yeah, important bits really to get out of the way and to be clear when you're going into the big day.
Yeah, the other thing we tried to do, John, as well, was that we would travel down the day before. We'd got the hotel booked, everything sorted out. We'd travel down the day before, which was the playoff day to the other leagues, one of the other leagues, and I was like, I wanted to go at 3:00 in the afternoon on the coach, so that we weren't watching it and listening to it and those sort of things. So we had bacon and eggs in the bungalow, didn't we? With just the staff. The big eggs and stuff in the staff room. Did the training, got on the bus, and we're going down. We're not got the game on the radio or anything like that. We're on our way because we're playing tomorrow. And it went into blooming extra time, I think, didn't it? So when we got there, the game was on the TV still, and the lads could catch up. But it was just one of those little things that we thought, right, let's try. So we kind of worked at detail of what was best for us and how we could do these things, and that was just one of them that didn't quite work out, but it was just the way we tried to organise ourselves. And this game, this trip, this game, this situation was about us. What can we do to try and win this game? Because that's what we wanted to do, and the focus was very much on that, obviously.
The Mansfield game probably showed how much, what strong squad you had, or how many good players there were waiting in the wings. But I think most of the team probably was pretty settled. But you had big decisions to make up front, and also you had a big decision to make on JJ, didn't you? Because JJ had done so well that season, but he'd had a chickenpox scare. How clearly do you remember that? Did you have big chat about whether to put him in or whether it was fair to leave him out, or that sort of thing? That must have been a difficult one, was it?
That was. With great respect, that was easier than the front lads, how to work the front two and stuff like that. Because JJ, we what if he only lasts an hour? What if? And, there was what ifs about selection of John Jones. He'd been a terrific player for us all season, but never even got on the bench, did he? So I couldn't do that for him. But the front boys, we'd lost to Grimsby twice. They got two big centre backs, and they handled Damien and Coyote quite well, if I remember rightly. And I thought, you know what, they might struggle against Steve Guinan, who comes off, and Gilly, who gets in between, and sort of different types of strikers. And I'm not claiming, because we talked about it, Keith and I, and what we're going to do, because they've beaten us twice. Is there something in that where you go into the game thinking, blimey, we can't beat these or whatever? And we just threw something different at them. And that was going right back to the conversation that you guys had earlier, Keith had, about the four strikers. We had them all available for us, and which two were we going to choose? How were we going to play it? And we went for the two smaller ones, if you like, rather than the big physical sort of situations. And I think that threw their centre backs out a little bit. But that was a lot of chat and conversations between Keith and I, and what should we do, why this, and getting there in the end. But JJ wasn't that much of a problem, as I say, because we went, no, we can't put him in. That's a risk. The other two guys weren't a risk. It was just getting the decision right, and it came off okay, thank goodness.
Yeah, it was, as you said, the pitch wasn't great, which is a bit disappointing for a cup final. But then you felt like you had to maybe do something a bit different because Grimsby had done well against you in the league. So, what are your actual standout memories of the game? Because I think Keynesy got away with one in the first half, didn't he? A challenge on, was it Parkinson?
Keith, go on, because I'm going to. Otherwise, I'm going to get angry.
Well, you know what? I can't remember that. I can't remember that one. Was it? I could just going back on the decision which John made on Gillespie and Guinan. We'd gone to Grimsby and got 3-0, got smashed 3-0. We'd gone a home game, we lost 3-0. So they'd scored 6 and we hadn't got 1. So, that was a real talking point just before the final. The final itself, the more things I can remember is actually, the smash on the face with Craig Armstrong, the efficiency of the bench, really. Wezza being really clear about, it wasn't time to get back on. The decisions that were made on the bench quickly. Mickey Bell coming on, playing. And that was early in the first half. So it was quite a disruptive start to it. I just thought that I thought we had the momentum, and I actually thought we had more rhythm in the game than they did. I actually thought that we started really well. I just can't remember. Sorry, John. I can't remember the Keynesy one with Parkinson. It doesn't stick in my memory with that. But I just remember the whole day going okay until this sort of disruption early on. But the efficiency, everyone just sort of getting on there, and Mickey Bell's a real good senior pro. Nice left foot, knows what it's about, and he sort of slotted in seamlessly, really.
Yeah, I don't think Higgsy had an awful lot to do, did he, John? But Steve, I remember Steve Guinan Steve Gillespie running through and having a bit of a chance, but just getting smothered by the keeper. And as Keith said, you did start quite well, didn't you?
Yeah, and we you always kind of want to do that when you're managing a team. That's the kind of one of the last things you say when your team are going out. Come on, let's start right. Let's do this, and that's always a good sort of stand-up shout when you don't know what else to say to them. But yeah, it was just getting that right. But the one thing you don't want to be, and this is what we tried to prepare for, was them to be overawed by the situation. You know, it's not full, but there's nearly 30,000 people in the place. It's a massive day. All their families are there. Everybody's, we've got this thing. This is what we've been working for. It's going to be or not to be today. And it's like, if you sit and think about it too much, you can have a problem. So it was kind of getting everybody right. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. The interesting thing, listening to Keith there, he's talked about Wezza, the physio, and making big decisions. And I talked to you right at the beginning of this about the importance of the staff. And that for me and for Keith, that is we're the manager, assistant manager, and what can we do? We need some help. We're not the be all and end all. We know exactly what to do. And certainly with injuries and players like that, Ian Weston was brilliant on making quick decisions. He knew that we had to make them. He knew that he had to be a part of it, and he knew he had to be correct. And not only that, we got Mike and John who did the kit and everything else, but everything had to be spot on. So that side of the day for me was brilliant, that the guys did it. So I just wanted to reiterate that the importance of that. But playing wise on the day, yeah, get on with it. My biggest memory is the penalty that didn't go in and the player that never got sent off. And I remember standing there for the last 20 minutes doing nothing but thinking, for goodness sake, I hope they don't come back, because that'll be the biggest situation ever. Because 10 years later, the referee, who all retired at that time, and I'd left obviously at that time, we met at a game and he apologised to me that he should have sent the player off. And I went, well, 10 years ago, I'd have been, thanks very much. And he actually did, and that's fine. And I respect him for doing that. But at that time, we kind of knew that, Keith, didn't we? And I just thought, for everything we've done, if this is just going to get turned on its head now, and that decision is going to be the massive talking point, then flipping out, what have I done wrong? And fortunately, it didn't work out that way. We got what we tried to get.
Yeah.
What you say about the staff is reflected by the scenes after the final whistle. Obviously, Steve Guinan got the winner, and everybody was on the pitch. I think the bus driver, the chiropractor, the physio, the groundsman, the reserve physio, the kit man, and that was noticeable. They all had the t-shirts on, celebrating with JJ, Michael Townsend, who weren't involved in the squad that day, and that, I think, highlighted the unity you had off the pitch.
Yeah. Keith, yeah.
Well, that's Cheltenham for me. I mean, it's like, everybody's so important. There's John the tea man at match days. There was was it Barry who used to open the doors up and things like that, who used to come in on his bike. And John had really, that's the one thing about learning from, just to embrace the environment really for what it is. It's and that's the heartbeat of the football club. You have to understand what Cheltenham's about, and John got that straight away and sold that to me really. This is what it's about. Everybody's part of it. It's important that we encourage people to be part of it, and that's what we did. And when John left, I was trying to maintain that, tried to keep that sort of family spirit. It was used to say it's Cheltenham, not Chelsea. We used to have some pride going to the bigger clubs. Little old Cheltenham, they're going to upset people. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many people, unfortunately, were removed from their jobs after having not disposed of little old Cheltenham. And that was what it was. And we sort of had that belief inside, and that togetherness right the way through, chefs and on match days, and it was just embracing everybody, and that's what it was about, and that was the heartbeat of the football club.
Yeah, we used to go at Christmas time, didn't we? Used to say to the staff, we're doing this, we're going out Christmas, do you want to come? It's 20 quid each, okay? And there used to be 20 odd of us go out there. There was people from the youth department, people from the offices, and we'd go out in town, nothing secret, but we'd go out in town, we'd book a place, go out and just celebrate for Christmas, get a drink, get a bite to eat, and we'd all be out together in an organised fashion. But the numbers that we had, say we had 2 part-time doctors, but they came. We had a chiropractor who lived down south, and he came. They all wanted to be there and be right. We're all having a bit of a chit chat here. It's nothing to do with work, but it is. It's about, we're here because of the work that we do, and some of them were just match day people or whatever, but we did it. And I just remember going home from them thinking, what a great night that's been. 20 odd people that we've got together to run a football club. The people that sold the tickets, people that manned the gate, like you're saying, was the guy that drove the tractor, and everybody. We turned up, and it was just it was a special period in my career as a manager, particularly, and to think we'd got everybody, as many people as we could, put it that way, going in the right direction and working for the same thing, and we achieved it, Keith, to some extent, didn't we? We got there, and we, like I say, the enjoyment that we've got from it. I'm sure Keith is as well. I still get messages, as I say to you, from people during that time, the staff. Wes messaged me last week, Wes, with a joke, which he often does, and we got Mike Heather, bad one. Mike Heather and John will message me, and that is priceless to me, that those things are remembered in that way by those people, which is lovely.
I mean, it's easy, isn't it, when you go in the future, a bit of nostalgia and things like that, but the genuineness about it all. I mean, football is kind of ships in the night. John knows this, but it's that sort of affinity that you have back in your time and you look back, genuine people working. I like to mention as well, I mean, it sounds like talk show really, but people like Brian Forsbrook behind the scenes, and Ken Oram, and Bob, Bobby Bloomer, who was Cheltenham through and through, Bob. And with Bob, I mean, John brought me in, and Bob was helping John at the time, and that was always going to, I felt, might have been an awkward, but Bob was the perfect gentleman, and accepted me coming in, was really supportive of me, and has become a really close friend. We still keep in touch, and so it was just that special time with special people and genuine people, no nostalgia. It was just genuine people working to the best they could to help each other and support each other for the good of the football club. And there's not many times you can look back on that, with that special memory, really.
John, I think if I remember correctly, you slept with the trophy that night, I think, after the playoff final. And great scenes of celebration, and not too far to go home for the fans. And then the open top bus tour, which was great turnout despite it being a little bit damp. But then, that was an incredible achievement.
I can't remember. I don't remember it raining. No,
I don't think anyone cared.
No, we didn't. What I'd been, and this is where we got support from the hierarchy, the chairman and the directors. I'd asked them, when we obviously knew we were getting to the final, I said to them, yes, you can stay the night before, pre-match and all of that. I said, can we stay the night after? Why do you want to do that? I said, I want to do that because we've done this season, it'll be the 62nd, third game, whatever it was. We've all been together, we've all done this. I said, whatever the result, we're just going to get on a bus and go home and forget about it. I said, well, if we get beat, I want to say thanks to the people and whatever. I said, if we win, let them go. We can do what we want. But I said, can we stay over? And he thought about it and came back and he said, yeah, we got there in the end. And it was it worked out to be a great thing to do. And he actually had his family at the game, drove them home, and then came back in his car to be at the sort of party time after the game and be with us. So there were a lot of families there. I think Grant McCann's family come over from Ireland. Was brilliant, so they stayed as well. They were staying for the couple of nights, and I had a friend that actually came from Australia, which was unbelievable. He told me some months earlier, so if you get to the playoffs, I'm coming over, and he did. He flew over and went back within 2 or 3 days, but he stayed. We just had a great night. Some of the lads, I think, did go out, but found nothing to do on a Sunday and came back, and that was great. I wasn't bothered where they all went. I just bothered about what the trophy was doing, and I think, I don't know, it must have been about 1:30 or something like that, after we'd seen Keith dancing on the dance floor and things like that, doing his favourite stuff. And I took it to bed, and it was still there the next morning next to me, and it was brilliant. My wife was there. It was brilliant. It was shared it together, and with our families and with people if they wanted to do that, and that's what they did want to do it. And so the club and the chairman and the directors played a massive part in supporting us to do those sort of things and be able to chat now all these many years ahead and remember those really good supportive situations. So great fun, great time.
And I think getting promoted in your second full season was a remarkable achievement. But then what happened the next year was arguably as big, if not a better achievement. But as with football, you never get long to celebrate too much, do you? Because you have to start planning for taking on the big boys in League One. But again, I seem to remember it was pretty similar squad, wasn't it? Very stable, very consistent squad with a couple of strengthened loans and things like that during the season. But what do you remember about that summer? You know, then you're going to be going to take on teams like Nottingham Forest and Swansea and stuff like that.
Yeah, I knew you was going to ask me that. You know, we went, as Keith says, we did the tour round in the rain, or you said, and we've done the stuff. And the next day, Ali, my wife, and I went down to London, got on an aeroplane, and went to Australia for 3 weeks, and on the summer holidays, because it was all at the end of the May, wasn't it, going into June. So we just
it was a late one,
so off I went, and I didn't want to change the team and make a lot of big decisions. It worked brilliant for me, but I was away on holiday, and it was obviously been planned for a long time. And strange enough, when I got to the airport and we're down at Heathrow, Ali, myself, and when I'm waiting to get on the plane, this guy came. He was on the same trip as us and doing the same holiday. And he came to me and says, "You're John Ward, aren't you?" And I went, "Oh, flipping at you. Yeah, I am actually, but I'm going on holiday." And he went, "Just want you to know I'm a Grimsby Town supporter." And I went, "Oh, because I played for Grimsby." Not that I could remember that, but I played at Grimsby for a year. And he said, "Oh, I'm a Grimsby supporter. I was at your game." And I went, "Oh, right." I said, "Well, in that case, I'm sorry for you." But he said, No, I think you've done it. And he was actually very supportive. And he was on the same trip as us. So he was on the same bus as me every day. Never mentioned it ever again, which was fantastic of him, because he let me have the holiday that I really wanted to be 3 weeks away. Just let me go and enjoy myself. And we just did that, Ali and I. And so so there's no time for me to rebuild the team or do anything, but didn't have to, because as I said to you before, we'd done the contracts over a 2-year period, which was kind of unusual and not normal, if you see what I mean. But Keith and I believed in these lads and went, let's work with them. And again, I'm not going to upset him too much or embarrass him too much. Keith's a really good coach with young players and people, and gets them going and gets them to play. And so these lads benefit a great deal from what he did with them. And so I left it as I was, and I could go on holiday. So it was.
Didn't take the trophy with you to Australia, did you?
I didn't do that. No, we actually thought we'd lost it when we did the tour around on the bus. Someone said we can't find the trophy. Well, who had it last? And it was everybody had it, and it turned up. Someone had got it. Nobody had run off with it. It just disappeared from view for a little while. But yeah, daft little things like that you remember.
Yeah.
Sorry
there were
about the
loads
holiday story, Keith.
That's good, John. That's good.
Sorry, mate.
That's good.
There were loads of great results the following year. You know, you went and upset a lot of clubs, a lot of massive clubs. But I think one of the results that will stick in everyone's mind is probably the opening day, where you turned up at Swansea. I think they'd not long moved into the new stadium and turned them over with goals from Grant and KOD. And again, it was a very similar team that got you there. And I think you won your first 2 games, didn't you? You beat Tranmere at home as well. What a brilliant start at Swansea. How well do you remember that one in the heat at the Liberty?
Well, momentum's a wonderful thing, isn't it? You know, from going from those 60 games, and as John mentioned, there wasn't a great deal of change. So, due to the contractual thing, which was made that stability. But the game against Swansea was, again, I thought, looking back again, we deserved to win. Played with the confidence that we had from the previous season. And as you said, John, I think, we had quite a confident start. I think we won the opening 2 matches, and in the first 6 to 10 games, we were going okay. And obviously, as the season goes on, it sort of catches you up a little bit. But that momentum from the previous year sort of took us through into the opening stages of the next season. So, I would, again, it was we'd work with these boys. They started to get established. They knew what the strengths and weaknesses of the team were. I just thought that we were. I didn't sort of go in there thinking, "Oh, we're going to be up against it." I think we had some realisation about saying, you know, this is going to be tough over a period of the year, and obviously to stay up is a major achievement. But we didn't. Again, I didn't feel any trepidation going into it. Actually, I think it was more excitement to go in against another level and pitch ourselves and see how we're going to cope. And as we said, it was a good start to the season.
John, I remember you putting signs up. I can't remember the exact wording around the training ground. Something along the lines of, "It's easy to be nice to everyone when things are going well, but you know, you've got to hold it together when things aren't." Like, it was like a little poem or something you put up around. I don't know if you remember that little post, because you did have a bit of a rocky run of results after that great start. But I don't ever remember there being any sort of panic or, you know, bombing players out. You just treated them exactly like you had when they were winning.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I did, but I did keep putting notices up every now and again. I had some good books to read and come up with these different things on psychology and what have you. And it was just really, let's keep doing what we're doing. And my whole ambition, if that's the right word, or my own directive that year was to stay up, because the club had never gone up and stayed up. It'd gone up before and it had come back down straight away. And it was, we've got to stay up, we've got to do this. And my biggest recollection of that was, like, keep the boys going, keep the boys working, keep everything going, don't change things, because we lost more games as we'd expect to. We were still the smaller club in a big division, and like I said, we're trying to achieve something we hadn't, as a football club, hadn't happened before. And my biggest memory is going to Rotherham United away from home towards the end of the season, and we got changed. I managed to get the chairman, again, brilliant, managed to get the chairman to let us go overnight. Imagine that, Cheltenham to Rotherham overnight. Why do you want to do that, John? Well, I want to win the game, chairman. I want to stay up, and I'm sure you do as well. So it was a little bit of blarney, and he let us do it, Keith, didn't he? And we got to the ground, and it was porter cabins. When we were getting changed in porter cabins, and it wasn't ideal, but it was right. This is what it is. This is what we've got to do. We go back into the porter cabin at half time, 2-0 down. And I'm not saying I lost it, because I tried not to lose it, but I wasn't happy, and let the boys know I wasn't happy. And we'd done this and we'd done that, and I'd put my neck on the line getting the chairman to pay this, and my neck goes back on the line. I take that, but this is what you've got to you've got to do this. And then I think JJ got a couple, and we went on and won 4-2. And at the end of the game, sort of an hour after that kick off from me, and it was more down for me than them, but from an hour from that, we're being applauded off by 200 or 300 or 400 supporters and a whole bunch of directors. So it worked out in the end. But I just remember that day was not going to plan at all. The whole trip wasn't going right, and then it suddenly turned out right, and everybody was happy, which is what happens in sport.
And if you look at the team, sorry, Keith, after you.
No, it's okay. I just to mention about the mark of a leader is when people come in and lead, and John was always the leader. Every Monday there was an answer somewhere. There was a leading light, so to speak. He always, as I said to you before at the start of the conversation, he had that ability to stay. I'm not sure if he felt it inside, but always exterior was to be, level-headed, not too high when you win, not too low when you don't. And as John said, we lost more, and I wouldn't say we expected it, but it's reality. But every Monday morning when we used to come in, it was back on the training ground, back to doing what we do, and just to work even harder, and just to make sure that John always used to say, come in on Monday and have an answer, even if it's the wrong one. I don't know if you ever remember saying that, John, to me, and that's what led me into my sort of short managing career. I always felt that sometimes you can be laid flat on a Sunday through a real disappointment of Saturday's performance, but then Monday you've got, you're the man they're looking to. You've got to go in there and you've got to lead. And that's easier said than done, by the way, because, if you do feel it and there's criticism elsewhere or everywhere, that's difficult. But you've got to believe in what you're doing. John was a great believer in his work, in what he did. We all followed that because we knew it worked. And that's what got us through, I think. And I think, there were some good players, by the way, there that were good for the level, and that proved that because they moved on to better clubs. So they proved to themselves as well. Because I think you still have an own personal agenda. If you're going in as a football club to Cheltenham, you'll still want to improve yourself, or whether it's Jerry Gill to carry on for another couple of years, or whether it's Brian Wilson to use it as a stepping stone to come again. Everyone has that personal agenda and personal drive. So although it's the team, there's still some, personal achievements to get. And I think everyone wanted to prove that they could capable of coping in League One football.
Yeah, if you look at the team that went up, Grant moved on in January, regarded by some as one of Cheltenham's best ever players, and Birdie came in and did very well. Then Brian Wilson moved on again. I think he at least doubled the price you paid for him. And Keynesy played left midfield in that Rotherham game, John, that you mentioned. And then, if that wasn't bad enough to lose those two, in the summer, Craig Armstrong, JJ Melligan, KOD moved on. But did you sort of, as disappointing as it was to see them move on, did you almost see that as success? Bring player in, improve them, give them the chance to go and play at a high level. Was there a little bit of satisfaction in that as well?
Yeah, I knew that was the case. But we've been chatting today. We've covered 4 years in terms of what we're talking about, and that was my kind of disappointment attached to it. And don't get me wrong here, but I'm thinking we've worked really hard to get this together. We talked about that, Keith and I, and now we've got to a point where we've got to start all over again. And with, do I want to start all over again? And the club were brilliant. The club had made me an offer of a contract. I talked, yes, I want to do this and want to do that, and it was disappointing to me, not because the boys had gone on and done well, because I understand that, I get that, and what have you. But so, have I got a chance to do this? Don't get me wrong here. This is going to, I don't know. You're going to have to deal with this one. But can I get higher and further? This is me personally. Can I get higher and further with this team and this football club? And my answer, when I thought about it, was no. And that sounds awful now, but 3,500 every week, and you know the score, you know what I'm saying, and I'd sold my best players, and yes, we'd made money on them, but they weren't giving that to me as the manager to buy other players. We didn't buy players particularly, so it was, where do we go now? And I was looking at it as, I've got to start again, John. and that I found that a tough one to think about. So there you go. If that's upset anybody, I apologise, but that's what happened to me.
Yeah, well, I said it before we started recording, but you were in some ways victim zero in success, weren't you? Because when you do that well, people start getting picked off. Yeah,
that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, incredible achievement to finish 17th. That remains the highest the club have ever finished. But I think what Keith then did the following year, after the change of you moving on, we'll talk about that in a minute. But finishing 19th when a lot of those good players had, the top players had gone on and brought some decent money into the club. But having money is one thing, but being able to attract players and pay the wages is something very different, isn't it? Even if you've got a chunk of money to spend. Yeah. So how hard was it trying to replace you can almost put together an 11 of players that you sold on to bigger and better clubs.
Go on, Keith.
Okay. Well, as John mentioned, I mean, I think, when you take an overall view of it, it's extremely difficult to sustain success at that level of a football club, because your gates are 3,500 no matter what. You do get the odd full house, as we did at Leicester, Nottingham Forest and Leeds the following year. But it's like what you're doing is you're recruiting in League Two. You're making those players having 2 or 3 years and getting them better, and then they move on. And then suddenly now you're at League One and you're now having to replace those players, but it's generally League One money. And then that's the difficulty, because it's difficult to go and get a goal scorer that won't demand high money or established. It means that you'll have to bring a young player in. he's now got to establish himself, not at League Two, he's got to now establish himself at League One, which is doubly difficult. So, you know, it had all these problems to it. It is extremely difficult. And I think the other thing is that I probably, when I came away from it, was probably, it takes a lot of energy away from you, John, doesn't it? You know, you're absolute, you know, I felt absolutely worn out. I wasn't experienced enough as John, and John would have dealt with it far better than I did. But, you know, wholeheartedly threw myself into my first job. I look back now, and I, you know, if someone says to me, what would you tell me? What would you advise? And I'd have to say, pace yourself, you know, because we had this problem of trying to, I think, when John left, we were short of players, short of quality. We were heading in the wrong direction, and it was a lot of time, a lot of energy. And I say, even going to meet these players and having loans and sitting with Bob in the office, John, until 11 o'clock at night, when that November dealings, you know, trying to get somebody through the door, and lots of no's, lots of who's Cheltenham, those kind of things. But, you know, just trying to get someone and some momentum, because I think also as well, I forgot to mention, is probably that summer that John was there when we stayed and had the highest finish. People like John Finnegan and were sort of seeing players go, and they're not daft players, you know. They'll actually say, well, what we're going to do, what we're replacing with, and you're kind of saying, well, hold on, bide your time, we'll get them in. And when you don't, even the players, even your most senior players, are going, well, this is going to be a tough ask to survive again. And that's what you're asking the players to do, is to just dig in again. And it's the energy factor. I think sometimes in the end you get yourself worn out, you know.
Yeah.
It's a long-winded sort of answer, but it kind of get those emotions into it, and the facts, really, because, you know, it's difficult to. And John's the most experienced at this level, and he probably saw it, as he mentioned, that this is going to be a tough ask.
It was an emotional night at Port Vale, wasn't it, John? Because you knew that you knew that was going to be your last game, and didn't say anything to the players until immediately after the game.
Yeah. Okay.
And I genuinely think that most of the fans understood your decision at the time. You know, I don't remember there being much of a backlash. I think Carlisle had to pay a decent amount of compensation to sort of sign you. It was almost like a big money signing for them, and they were obviously a club looking to get into the Championship at the time. They were, you know, ambitions of getting out of that league in the other direction, whereas you were battling to stay up. But what was that night like? You know, how difficult was that, having built that team, seeing the players come of age, really, and then to have to say after the game, you know, the result was almost felt irrelevant in the end, but you lost the game and you had to go in and say, I'm off to Carlisle. And I think you were unveiled as their manager the next morning, weren't you?
Yeah, it had gone on for a little while, actually. And it was over the previous weekend where we'd got this game coming up, and I'd spoken to the board and said that I think I'm going to move on. They knew that I'd been to speak and stuff like that, because they'd got permission and what have you. And I said, no, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to have a go. And my view of that, rightly or wrongly, was that I thought that Carlisle at that time were doing pretty well, and looking around the top part of the division. I thought, if I'm going to try and get into the league higher, then with great respect, I'm not going to do that at Cheltenham. I'm going to do that with somebody else. And they weren't that much a bigger club, but they had a momentum going and a situation going, like we just talked about with ourselves. And I thought, if I can get involved in that, and to be fair, at the end of it, we missed out by a point, and then just got beat in the playoffs, but we'd finished the highest position they'd ever finished in 30 years. So we'd achieved something, but without me getting out of the league, which is where I wanted to go. And it was, how do I do it? And I said, look, I'll stay for the game with Keith. I don't think I told you, Keith, did I? I can't remember.
No, you told me, John. You told me on the night before. And we said, right. Yeah, you were going to, whether you were going to mention it to the players, that was the debate.
I did, sorry. Yeah, I did. I just remember saying to you on the bench, well, all the best, mate. In about the 89th minute.
Yeah, he pushed me forward, John, into the technical area. We were 3-0 down as the third one went in. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, did we have Jerry? Was Jerry sent off?
Yeah, no, it wasn't Jerry. Wasn't Jerry?
Lee Ridley. Lee Ridley was it sent off? Or
Lee
Gallus?
Ridley got sent
Somebody
off.
was sent off.
Yeah,
Lee Ridley. Yeah.
I think it was Lee left back.
Yeah, so you see, my memories just I wasn't with that game at all. So
No.
as you can now tell, and I remember coming in and thinking, I sat the players down, said, look, I've got something to tell you. I've got to tell you this. And they all just sort of looked up from staring at their boots, which you tend to get when you lost 3-0. And I told them, so I'm leaving, guys. I'm leaving tonight. I'm going to join Carlisle tomorrow morning. So this is my last game. And I got a round of applause just out the blue, totally, like, they didn't know, they didn't realise it. I don't know where it started, how it started, and I got a lump in my throat telling you now. But it's like, flipping out, have I done the right thing? You know, we've just lost 3-0, and these lads have come to me and said, all the best, Gaffer, thanks very much. And it's just taking a deep breath, and you know, obviously the next day is a fresh start and off you go again. But that moment will stay with me forever, because it was extremely emotional, and it was from them, it was just off the cuff. It wasn't nothing, they didn't know anything, but it was just something that was spontaneous. And I thought, wow, didn't realise they thought that much about me. But I've got to go. And the next morning I'm motoring up the motorway and saying hello to some new people. But that was a very emotional evening, and left Keith with it, I'm afraid. Sorry, mate.
No. It was, from my personal perspective, John told me the day before, and in fairness to John, he kept that for a while. I mean, he said it had gone on for a bit, so he first told me the day before, and I remember driving home. I was devastated. I'll be honest. My first thought was, "Blimey, you know, what are we going to do?" The leader's going, and it wasn't probably as much the Port Vale game. I was just thinking about the long term, really, what was going to happen. Yeah. So. And then suddenly, I suppose, then turning to myself, thinking, well, do I want to have a go at it? You know, John suggested I should do, and I wasn't totally convinced that the board were going to have a look around first and just put it in a temporary position. But sort of sat home with my wife Claire and said, look, John's going. You know, there might be an opportunity to have a go at it. What do you think? And the talk was, well, that's one of the reasons I came to come to Cheltenham, was to work with John and to give me that sort of that insight into how to manage. You know, I love my coaching, but the managing is also another string to your bow. So probably a little bit too soon, hand on heart, really, but you know, there's never a perfect timing in football, is there? So you grasp it while you can, and then. As John left the following day, you know, I can remember a call from the chairman, in fairness, was really supportive and said, look, you know, there's an opportunity for you to get some loans, and there's a little bit of money there for you to you know, we are sort of hitting rock bottom. There is an opportunity for you to try and get one or two loans in. So that's what we tried to do. It was a real difficult time to try and smooth things over and trying to get some kind of confidence back into the team.
Looking at the results, Keith, you had a good win at Swindon in the trophy in one of your first games in charge, and you brought Alan Wright in pretty early on as one of your first signings. But your first league win was a good one. I'm sure you remember it well, but Leeds at home.
Yeah.
They'd had a bit of pressure, but I think Higgsy had made some saves, and then Stephen Gillespie popped up with a late winner. Yeah,
we rode our luck that day. But that's, you know, when you're playing Leeds and your Newcastles, as we spoke before, you know, they you know, you need them to play not as well, and you need that little bit of luck. And also Shane Higgs, who probably John agrees, you know, at that time was probably one of the best keepers in League One, I felt. You know, had a real presence about him and had an outstanding game that day. The Alan Wright one was just by off chance. I was with the risk of throwing a name. I remember speaking to Paul Pesci-Solido, of all people, and we were just chatting, how you getting on? And I said, well, you know, find it hard, and I'm after a left back. You don't know anyone, do you? And he said, well, what about Alan Wright at Sheffield United? And I said, well, I haven't heard from him for a while. And he said, look, he's waiting to go to Australia. He's training with the boys at young kids at Sheffield United. I'll give you his number. So rang him out the blue, and you know, it's funny, isn't it? You know, he came down and said, look, I'll come down and have a look at it. And we signed just on a 1 month deal, because he was due to go out in Australia in December. which ironically fell through at the beginning of December. So that's where Alan's continued his with contract, and we signed him. And he was very much like a Jerry Gill, a John Finnegan, Stevie Guinan, and those kind of people. An outstanding professional throughout his career, and gave us a lot of quality in terms of his left foot and his delivery and things. So he was an excellent, by off chance really. It's funny how they suddenly something just throws up.
Yeah. John, I know you obviously had a new job to focus on straight away. You had to focus on getting Carlisle, trying to get Carl up. But
Yeah.
How badly did you want Keith to be given that chance? Because I remember you backing him for the job straight away at Port Vale before you headed off up north to Cumbria. And it wasn't long before you had to come back and take him on, which must have been quite a strange one for you in the January. But did you sort of strongly want him to get that chance because of what the good work he'd done under you as your number two?
Yeah, if you're asking me how much, as much as I wanted to do it myself, so I can't speak any higher than that. Keith did a great, I know he's there listening, but Keith did a great job for me to when he came into the football club. I knew he could coach, I knew what he could do, and I'd seen him work at Wolves, obviously, and to be able to bring him in, I used to really look forward to Thursdays, and he'll smile now because he said, Keith, take the defenders, off you go. I'm going to go with the forwards and give me a shout when you're done. And we'd go off and do our bits and give him his license if that's, yes, I'm the manager, but go and do what do you want me to do? Oh, go and do it. You can do it. You're good at what you do. And we did a lot of Thursdays like that, Keith, didn't we?
Yeah.
Where we sort of split the group. And I was an ex-forward, loved doing my forward. Keith was a poor defender, so he had a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So we got a few more fouls away after he started teaching. But we worked like that. There was a truth, and I got to the point where going through the weeks, if we didn't have a Tuesday game, we'd sit on the Monday, as Keith says, in the bungalow and say, what we're going to do. I said, well, you take him, Keith. I'll pick him up on Thursday. What do you want me to do? Go on, you do what you want. And there'd be times where I'd say, go and do what you want, Keith. I'll just be there. I'll just watch him. And if I step in on anything, it won't be telling you, or I'll step out again. Don't worry, I'm not taking over. And that's the biggest compliment I could pay him, I think, that I could trust him totally with taking the group, taking the team, working the place, teaching whatever he was doing. We're going to do what you want within what he knew how we worked. And so that's why I brought him into the club, because I knew I could trust him, not only with being the person he is, but being given the ability that he's got working with players, which was brilliant. So there you go.
Thanks,
so, yeah.
John. I think, John might not admit this, but he was one of my first calls. I mean, John works now at the LMA for mentoring, and at that time we didn't have any mentors, no one to sort of bounce anything off. And I know John was obviously rivals in terms of in the league, but I remember, I don't know if you remember, John, there was a few phone calls saying, look, I've got a problem. And it probably wasn't so much on the coaching, it was just about managerial things, decisions and things. So, and sometimes you just need someone to bounce off, and John was always there at the end of the line. But again, like probably John's, it is a great way of saying, look, you work it out, but there's a support there. But you've got to make the right decision. What you decide, not me. But he's always been there with sound advice, and and I think it's a great job he's got now for any young managers now. And I know he deals with Michael and has a chat with Michael every now and again if he needs to. So, and when you're young, and as I said, when like I did, you kind of burn out, not have any opportunity to sort of bounce anything off. So yeah, I mean, John was always on the end of the line just to give me some advice on how to deal with things. And it's probably one of my proudest achievements, actually, just that season. To do what we did, because truth be known, it wasn't expected, and and the fact that we had to get a fair number of new players in, and probably from the time where we had that stability over a 2 or 3 year period we've talked about, this was suddenly now having a fair number of loans coming in when you could have loans. Bristol City, I've got to say, Gary Johnson was a great help to me by getting Richard Keogh, Stevie Brooker, and Alex Russell. They were key players to us sort of getting out of trouble. Had that little bit extra quality in League One, and Gary was very helpful at the time, just down the road. Obviously benefited him. Steve was just coming back. Stevie Brooker was coming back from a serious injury. But rather him doing the reserve football at Bristol City, he came and played first team football at Cheltenham. We had to treat him as a sort of rehab at first team football. I remember his first game, I think he had 45 minutes to take him off, but it was just trying to get him back into some proper football, and he obviously enjoyed it rather than playing in the reserves. So, but they were really, really good acquisitions, along with Alan Wright, that saw us through a very difficult time. So yeah, I mean, obviously the win at Leeds was a fantastic night. So, and that was in that period where we had a really good, I think it was January, is it, John? I'm not quite sure. Is it January time? I think we played.
Had a great run in January, yeah. Yeah,
John,
great run. 4 clean sheets in a row, yeah.
As well, yeah. So we had that was a real lift for everybody, because we were sort of rooted near the bottom at that time. So it gave us a little bit of belief, and took us right to the end game.
Yeah, we'll come on to that great day in a minute, but you mentioned riding your luck a little bit against Leeds at home, but the away game, I from what I remember, you could have won by more than 2-1. You were really good value for that. That was.
Yeah.
Do you think that was the best performance that you had? Or, to go up there and turn them over like that was something special, wasn't it?
Yeah, I agree, John. I think we deserved to win. I think it's probably for the last 15 minutes where they scored, and then there was a bit of a mad last 10 minutes. But certainly over 70 minutes, we were excellent, very worthy winners. I remember Eddie Gray actually coming up to do my press conference at the end and shook my hand and said that it's one of the best performances here, which coming from a great man like himself, I was extremely pleased to hear that. So it was a great result. Actually, there's a little story that John said about his kit, and I've got to have to let you know about this. You'll laugh at this, because we just played at Yeovil, and at Yeovil we lost 2-1, and I thought we were really poor at Yeovil. And I didn't often do this, but there was a bit of John about myself really here. I went in on the Monday and I was a little bit distant from them. So usually it's sort of galvanised, get them going. We got Leeds United. But I thought to myself, no, I'm not going to go back this way. I'm going to stay away from them a little bit. So they might sort of think, what's going on with him? So I stayed away. But the funny thing was then I was then due to pick the coach up halfway up the M5, as John used to have these meeting points. And I for some reason got myself locked out of my house, and I was supposed to meet at something like about 12 o'clock. So I'm actually outside my house, and I actually had to now phone for a locksmith, because which took hours to get this new locks done. So I missed the coach. So I'd obviously phoned Bob up and said, "Look, Bob, I'm going to have to drive up after." And I'll meet you at the hotel. So I'm sure the players thought this was a ploy. Where's the manager? What's happening? He hadn't spoke to us Monday. He's not on the coach Tuesday travelling up. Where is he? What's happening? But I'd actually locked myself out the house, and in the end, I got there just at the hotel and managed the team talk. And ironically, we had the team talk out in the car park outside this hotel. We had a walk, and instead of this usual rigmarole of leading up to what we were going to do, I just sort of got them gathered round and talked about what this was meant. And Leeds United was just in name alone, and the players, if you really look at the players, they are League One players, and we are capable of winning this, and so yeah, it's a story which you'd think, again, a master plan, like John said, with his suit, but this was the fact that locked myself out. There you go.
Yeah, that result, brilliant result. And then you followed that with the 1-0 win over Bristol Rovers, with Brooker getting the winner. And you had a good run of form, but then you had a little dip. Probably because you're playing teams like Nottingham Forest, so it seems harsh to call it a dip. But you went into the last game, obviously needing a result to make sure that you stayed up. And just to make it even more interesting, Doncaster were going for automatic promotion, weren't they? So there was all sorts of things.
They were a good team, John, weren't they? They had Shorter Driscoll's team, footballing team, and some really good players. But going back to where we had the blip, we lost Steve Brooker. Steve then went back to Bristol City. I remember Gary phoning me up, and Gary was under a bit of pressure down at Bristol. He hadn't won in a few games. And of course, there was a phone in saying, well, how comes Brooker's out in Cheltenham scoring all the goals? and you can't get your goals here at Bristol. We need him back. So Gary had phoned me on the Monday morning and said, look, I'm sorry, Keith, we've got to get him back because, you know, I'm under a bit of pressure. I need to play him or I need to get him involved. So he'd served his purpose. He got his rehab back, and of course he scored a few goals for us, which kept us in the league. But as soon as he left, we were struggling then to find the goals. And as you mentioned, John, we'd lost a few games prior to this. I remember we'd lost late at Oldham just prior to the last game. And sitting in the office with John Sherrington, who was manager at Oldham at the time, and I remember him giving me 2 videos of they'd beaten them twice, home and away, and one of the teams to beat them. And he gave me these 2 videos. He left so kind and said, "Look, have a look at those. You might find something out of that." So yeah, leading up to the big day, it was a bit like we talked about. You know, took a lot from John, really, talking about trying to take the weight of pressure or the expectancy of that week, and we tried to make it really low key. And I think I gave them a couple of days off actually. When we went to one of the chairman was really helpful. Went to a health spa one of the days, and then led into Thursday, Friday, where we trained on the main pitch, which was. That's rare, isn't it, John, with Mike Heather about? So
was he
bung
away?
him a few quid. So that was the whole. And again, probably talking about. I think I've mentioned this to you, John, about the selection. I had this problem where they had marauding left and right backs, and you're thinking, well, where are you going to stop all this attacks coming from? And I had this dilemma of playing Steve Gillespie but playing him on the right. But after thinking about it, I was kind of thinking, well, he's going to end up being a right fullback. He's going to have to start tracking this winger. And I'm thinking he's my top goal scorer. He's got 14 goals or 15 goals in the season, 14 goals at the time. And in the end, it was bringing Steve Gillespie and Paul Connor together and saying, listen, I've got this dilemma. What do you like to do? I know you like to play together, but this is my problem. And then we just talked about how we're defensively going to do it, and one dropping underneath and trying to give us some extra help. And they were happy to do it. Of course, they wanted to play together, and it worked out okay. But the second half was the longest second half of they absolutely murdered us. And again, Higgsy was outstanding, and but again, probably typified. I said that at the time, typified the Cheltenham spirit, hanging in for grim death and getting over the line through their application attitude and never say die attitude.
Yeah, I think I've tried to avoid concentrating on too many individual players because it was such a good team effort, both through the promotion and staying up. But Gillespie was another great example, wasn't he, John, of getting a lad in on loan. I think you signed him something like 5,000. And then he was like the magic, really, wasn't he, Keith? After Steve Brooker left, it was Gillespie's goals, really, that got you over the line, although Paul Connor chipped in and a lot of other players chipped in. And then he went for, I think, could have been up to 400,000, which at that point was by far the biggest money Cheltenham had ever received for a player. So even though John had gone on, again, he was, another one of those Wilson players, Odegaard players. I know you didn't sign Kay, but you certainly got the best out of him. And he had a little bit of magic, but he probably just needed somebody to look after him injury-wise, didn't he? Because he had struggled a lot throughout his time at Bristol City, I think, with injuries, which was probably the only thing that held him back. So what did you see in him, John, that thought will persist with him?
I could see goals in him, and that's what we looked for. He was a goal scorer, played off the shoulder, played with another striker, a bigger striker. He was not the main striker, if you see what I mean. He needed a centre forward to play off, somebody to take the weight, because he didn't have that. But he had a lot of cunning. He was a lad from Liverpool. He was clever. He was crafty. He knew how to look after himself, and he'd grown up that way. The one time I had Stephen Gillespie to sort of reprimand was when he did a report about himself. What do you want to do? He says, I want to earn enough money from football to retire. And I said, well, you're not going to do that at Cheltenham. So I had to pull him in the office and say, Gilly, are you serious about this? So and And he just, oh, did I say, yes, you did say that. And just realised he'd realised what he'd said and how it sounded and how it would look. And said, you can't say that when you're playing for Cheltenham Town. You just can't. And he was fine. He was they call it a scally, is it, when they're from Liverpool and stuff like that. Great lad, not a problem. But he knew how to duck here and dive there a little bit and do this. Nothing unpleasant, nothing unlawful, but he was a bit of a lad around the place, and just I think he probably thought his football was a bit easier than it was to sort of stay in the team, because he certainly had the goals in him, as Keith said, and he got the goals out of him. But yeah, he was a great lad to have about. He's actually coaching now. He's coaching at Liverpool.
Oh, good.
So there you go. So he's been in touch. He's another guy that stayed in touch with me, and I give him all the credit for doing what he's doing, which is fantastic. And he's loving it, by the way. He's enjoying himself.
Oh,
so there you go. You never can tell when they're 21, can you? But he's done well.
He was streetwise. That's the word. Streetwise, he was clever. He was a clever footballer. He was one of those that played in. He's now fashionable in between the lines. He was found space, found in between space, and he always had this ability to run at you as well, John. Didn't he? He'd turn and face you up, and he'd ask questions of the big centre halves, and he could carry the ball and have a little dribble. And he was, as I said before, the four strikers at the time. He was that that one played in between people.
Yeah, well, he gave a problem to the Grimsby boys, didn't he? Which is what we hoped he would do. Him and Steve Guinan, that they wouldn't play up against them, and it become a power battle.
Yeah,
we tried to make it a clever battle, and Steve Guinan and Gillespie did very well for us. So that's the type he was. Yeah. So good lad.
So that night, obviously you signed Stephen Gillespie's good mate Scott Brown as well. He had a terrible injury midway through the previous year, but he'd come back and also played a part, didn't he, in getting you over the line. But as you said, Keith, it was all-consuming job. Took everything out of you. How much of relief or how joyous was that night? Because I think it was the end of season presentation night that night, and it wouldn't have probably been that enjoyable if you'd lost to Doncaster. But you got the job done. Great scenes of celebration, and do you remember the feeling of satisfaction after that one?
Yeah, probably relief first, but like John mentioned before, when you have these nights, and it kind of you obviously hope the day goes well, and you hope it's a fantastic night. But equally, like John mentioned, it was one of those that if it didn't, then we gave it a right good go. We weren't expecting. We took it to the last game. I was kind of think this speech just in my head, just to mention that at the end of it all, if it didn't go so well. The whole day was a fantastic day. I remember getting there again. The huddle on the pitch again, very much John's trait of getting everybody together before the match, making sure this was a collective. And then after the game, it was, I've got to say, I think I went to bed about 10:30, 11. I was absolutely shattered. I mean, obviously the celebrations went well into the morning, but I was worn out, absolutely worn out on the day, the emotion of it all. Just relief, and it's funny. I actually sitting there, I was actually in my room thinking, and John will laugh at me. I was thinking about, so what about next year? What are we going to do next year? And it was like, wow, we've just got the skin of our teeth. We're going to have to do it all again. And so planning ahead, but which was ridiculous. I mean, I should have just enjoyed the day. But that was me. That's where I had to learn a bit better to cope and enjoy the days and just let it go a little bit more. But that was probably one of my faults really when I first started out and managing.
It's not a fault, Keith. It's a situation. I just going off that little story, you just reminded me when I was at Bristol City, we got promoted at Ashton Gate, and I remember the team came back out. We're walking around the pitch, and I don't know, there's 15,000 people there, and Terry Connor's my assistant there. Yeah. We're walking around, and I'm just in a bit of a trance, and he's come up and say, "You all right? Are you okay? What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Sorry, mate, I'm okay." Yeah. He said, "You okay? What's wrong?" I said, "I'm just thinking that we've got promoted." I said, "That'll probably keep me in work for another 2 or 3 years, Terry." And he went, "You're joking, aren't you?" And I went, "No, I'm not actually." Yeah. And And I think they're sometimes, like you say, that everyone's enjoying themselves, and you've gone, oh, I go to bed, I'm shattered, and your mind's different being a manager and
Yeah.
a coach and being a player. Being a player, it's yeehaw, let's go and let's hit the town. As a coach, you're like, right, what am I going to do now? Can I buy in? Can I do? What do I need to change this? And you kind of think that quicker than you probably should, but you do, don't you?
Yeah, and also, John, I think it was a day or two after. Then we had to get the guys in every 15 minutes and talk about contracts and things. So I was we were letting a few go as well.
Yeah.
So that's not, that's one of the hardest jobs as well, just to guys you've worked with for 2 or 3 years and saying, we're going to carry on. So that's tough,
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's one of the worst ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that summer, really, I remember Stephen Gillespie went during pre-season, didn't he? And it seemed to be an ongoing challenge for you. And I think, John, you know exactly what it would be like for Keith, trying to persuade a striker to come to the club, that's got guaranteed goals in them.
Yeah.
To a club like Cheltenham, it's not easy, is it? And I think you had several close, but couldn't quite get them over the line. Keith. Yeah. And some good, Mark Richards and Michael Boulding.
Gary Hooper.
Gary Hooper went on. And I think quite a few of the players you tried to sign ended up getting Scunthorpe promoted, didn't they, that season?
Absolutely. I think Nigel Atkins had a bug in my room or something. He was just picking up on my phone calls, but most went to him. But no, it was sorry, John, I'm just still your thing. But it was tough because you had so many near misses. That was the difficulty of it. It was. You got them into the building. Usually we took them to. We had 2 great facilities. The training ground. They looked around. Oh, we can't believe this. This is great, And then took them down to the pitch, and which was always kept really well. And they got that sort of vibe, and this is good. And then we talked money, and of course that we fell down on that. But listen, there's no blame to anybody. I'm not sitting here and saying they didn't back us, and it was what it was, and you just had to live with that and try and live to those constraints. And it was difficult because you losing players. You lose Gillespie for 400,000, and you're looking to try and replace him, and it's very difficult. You haven't got 400,000 to spend. It's, in fairness to the chairman, it was Gary Hooper, I think it was 150, I think, came from Southend. So, it was there, but we just couldn't get it over the line. And, so, difficult. And then we ended up going through pre-season. John will know this, pre-season, suddenly now there's not so many players, and the players are looking at, we're going to get people in, and it's coming nearer and nearer to the season. And, and then you do get those targets that suddenly these guys are waiting for better clubs to come pick, and then they're not. Now you're negotiating again. And, but like John will know, John had to do that all the time, and this was again new to me. And get the coaching right, get the right people in, everything really, the full package. That's difficult to pace yourself. You're kind of trying to cover all bases.
And in the end, it was Lloyd Awusu, wasn't it, who came in and he did score in his first couple of games, and really good track record, and he did well for the club. But not long after Lloyd and Josh Lowe came in, I think he worked so hard to get the players in, and then 6 games in, the board made the decision that it was time to change. So, what was that like for you, Keith? That's a stupid question, really, but Hartley Paul away was your last game. Seems quite early, in the season, considering what you'd achieved the year before. But did you understand why they did what they did, or was it a bit of a mystery to you?
Not really. Football's football. I mean, they probably thought that. They couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and they had the experienced man waiting in the wings. So, listen, I'd love to have had a bit more of a go at it. But the decisions are made, and probably my first thought was a bit of relief. I'll be honest when the call came, because you're full on. So, but on reflection, then after sort of 3 or 4 days, you're going, well, I'm not really sure what that was about, really. But it's just, you're not being in football, you haven't been sacked. I suppose it's welcome to the real world. So, I probably had a reflection of what I should have done better and things like that. But it's difficult. It's a difficult job. It's kind of like you're kind of firefighting a lot of the time. You're trying to put out fires and and just trying to keep that momentum going. And as John had put it all into place, that momentum for 3, 4, 5 years to sustain it is a tough ask.
Yeah, and then things change very quickly, and a lot of players that have been there for a while, it all completely changed, didn't it? And but we'll look at what you've both done since leaving Cheltenham. If we just touch on that, because John, you were at Carlisle, you've worked at some other good clubs. You had a good time at Colchester, I think, didn't you? Back to Bristol Rovers. You were offered director of football at Cheltenham at one point, weren't you? And I think that was quite close to happening when Russell Milton was manager, if I remember correctly. And then obviously you finished at Walsall, but now working for the LMA. So are you officially retired from management now, John?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
finally got rid of him.
Yes, I am. But as Keith mentioned earlier, I'm working with the LMA, which is great. Not full time or anything, but I'm looking after 7 managers. We picked the phone up. I mean, even now I've kept in touch with them all, and they're all at different levels, different clubs, obviously, and in different situations now. But it's now they need us. The LMA is unbelievably busy at the main office with lots of things going on. And particularly, obviously, the no games and what the manager's going to do and stuff like that. And I'm there for these 6, 7 guys who I speak to, as I say, on a regular basis. And until the lockdown came, I'd visit them once a month at least, or once every 6 weeks, and just go and talk to them on their own ground and basis. And what can I do for you? And I was the sort of middleman, or I am the middleman between them and the LMA union, who have got a lot of things happening, a lot of work to do. So really enjoy that. And like Keith says, I've got 1 or 2 guys who are first time in the job, and some a bit of experience, and I've got one now who's out of work and things like that. So it's a question of one looking for work. So I'm just trying to keep in touch with all the things that are going on, because as a manager, as Keith will say, you get, who do I talk to? Who do I complain to? Who do I say this to? Who can I ask this question to? And within your football club, if you ask your staff or your coaches think you've got a problem, they'll go, well, he's in trouble. The manager's in trouble. Who do you ask? You go to your chairman and ask him something. Goes, well, don't you know? You should know. That's what I pay you for. Right? Okay. Where do you go? And the LMA have had the foresight over the last 2 or 3, 4 years to say we need some people that these guys can go to, and so I'm on the end of the phone, which is great. I love it. And I kind of built that up over the other things you've said about what may have happened and what did happen. That's all built up, and hopefully I think I've got that experience to not tell them what to do, but to give them some conversation and some ideas. Because if I tell them what to do and it's wrong, that's my fault. So I just got to try and give them some ideas, things to think about, what to do, how to do it, and if you're not sure, go to the LMA then, go and talk to the hierarchy. But it's great. I really enjoy that, and it's a good position to be in. And I've made not just people I work with, not managers as their mentor. I don't like that word really, but I'm their friend and their go-to guy. I've done that for the last 3 or 4 years with some of them, and we've got very close, and I've got their trust, which is really important, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you had well over 30 years in management, I think, didn't you, in total, if you include the last spell at Walsall. And great for them to be able to draw on that experience. And that's brilliant, John. Thanks for that. And Keith?
John, one of the most underrated managers. One of the most underrated people. Seriously. It's just, my only sad thing about it, could have, should have been at the top level, really. Just as a person, as a manager and a leader, just really good person, and good at his job. Absolutely.
Thank you,
Keith. Thanks very much for that. And since you left Cheltenham, you had a successful spell at West Brom, didn't you? Including some time as a caretaker manager, but worked under some great managers there. And then obviously now the last few years you've been looking after England's next generation of, I think you're under 19s, you're under 20s now, aren't you? Is that right?
Yeah, at the moment, yeah, under 20s.
So how much are you enjoying that role?
Yeah, very much so. Working with the elite youngsters in the country, really blessed with that, because there's some real talent here. and that's showing up. I mean, the one big thing is that getting the opportunity. That's the one big criticism of the Premier League, I suppose, because of the competition and the for places. They don't get that chance early enough, but they are good players, and that's been the last 5 years has been a real joy to work with them. I suppose there's a frustration I don't get to work on a regular basis. I sort of have these international windows which we get together. That culminated in 2017. We won the Euros. That was the first time in 25 years of that age group. That was a fantastic evening, or fantastic 3 weeks. We're over in Georgia. So that was one of the highlights, as well as the Doncaster game or the survival. And then the West Brom thing was, I was extremely lucky to be involved in Premier League matches and working with some other good people, Roy Hodgson and Steve Clark and Alan Irvine. Those people gave me a lot of insight into managing and running football clubs. So I've been hugely lucky to work with so many good people and so many good players. So, long may it continue. I'm just enjoying what I'm doing, and hopefully that can continue.
There's a reason for that, Keith, that you've worked with those people and those good people, and have a think why that might be. Because you're pretty good at what you do, mate. Yeah, good for you. And you've dropped more names. You've dropped more names than I have. So well
sorry,
done.
mate. Yeah, sorry.
All right, it's good.
Only John Ward's the biggest one, though. That's the biggest name I've dropped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to finish on, Keith, you said earlier that sometimes football can be a little bit like ships in the night. But what I think is absolutely brilliant, and I think I'm right in thinking you still all meet up quite regularly, don't you, as a staff from the Cheltenham days?
Yeah.
How much do you enjoy? I don't know how often you get to do it now. Obviously, difficult situation at the moment, but when there's not lockdown going on, you meet up for a social, don't you, with some of the backroom teams? So how much do you enjoy doing that?
It's great. I mean, we probably haven't done it for a couple of years, John, have we? But I mean, there's all circumstances to that, obviously. But wherever I go, and I've actually been down to Cheltenham a couple of times this year to watch. By the way, Michael's doing a fantastic job there, and watched 2 really entertaining games. And whenever I go into the boardroom, although the chairman has now moved on, there's always a huge welcome there and a warmth from everybody. I really do have a real affiliated to the club, and I'm always sort of treated really, really well down there. So, and the people, as John says, we get texts, we get calls. It is unique. I don't have that with every club that I've worked at, but Cheltenham just had that bonding, and it is what it is. Cheltenham is that family feel and the warmth, and and previous managers have tried to destroy that a little bit, and I think that's probably why they haven't been as successful. You've got to understand what the fabric of the club is first, and work to it, and that's that special feeling with Cheltenham. It's that warmth and that family feel, and everybody pulling together.
Can I just say on that as well? What's been established with that group of people is that we know each other's partners, husbands and wives, don't we? So if we were to get together, you'd bring the ladies, we'd bring our ladies, they'd bring their husbands, and we'd all sit together, and as if we'd been doing it for many, many years. So it was not just the people that we worked with; it was the people that supported them, and so that was really important. I learnt that off Graham Taylor, by the way.
Yeah.
That was something that many, many years ago we did with Graham, and it works a treat, so suddenly one day you come home and say, manager's sending me off, I've got to go first thing in the morning. You go, well, we've got a party, but and they accept that you've probably got to go first thing in the morning because the good guys, the managers looked after him, and you support it. So that was what we had on it. It was not just us, it was our supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, strong partners, and as you said, John, difficult times, they're there for you, aren't they? So so we let them know how hard it was, didn't we?
Yeah.
Every day.
Got it, mate.
I was going to ask about Michael, because John, it sounds like you're supporting him a bit through the LMA. And Keith, you said what a great job he's doing. John, you managed him briefly as well at Cheltenham, didn't you? And
Yeah,
he's definitely somebody that understands the club, isn't it? From what where he started and how he progressed there and went on to bigger and better things.
yeah, I didn't want him to go, and that's another story. But the manager that signed him rang me 23 times when I was on holiday in Portugal, which was pretty annoying. And every time I said no and put the phone down. But anyway, that's another story, and we won't go into that, although I just have done. He's an extremely intelligent young man, both in common sense and knowledge, if you see what I mean. I don't just mean knowledge about the game. He's got a lot of knowledge about lots of things, and he's a very common sense young man. He's someone I've got a little bit closer to now in this management thing, working with the LMA with him, talking to him either on the phone or coming down to see him, which I've done a couple of times. Really enjoyed the conversations I have with him. He's some of the things is beyond me in what he does. And I go, wow, that's brilliant. Okay, well thought about, and the knowledge that he's got. But that's the movement, I think, of the LMA, where the teaching has got excessive and really, really good now for these young guys. And Michael can take that on very quickly and very much as a person. He's developing a backroom group of people, I believe, as well, isn't he? Within a coaching side and a setup on that. So the club are supporting him as a person within the club and what have you. And I think that's brilliant. And yeah, I would be one of many who would be absolutely delighted if they had a successful final period to this season, if they get it all going and get it completed. So yeah, good man. Nice guy to talk to, Michael. Like him a lot. Just wish he'd stayed with me a little bit longer at the football club, but. To be fair, I keep telling him his brother took over and might have been a better player than him anyway, so to get on with it.
Right, guys, I think that's quite a nice note to end it on, looking ahead to the man who's in charge at the moment, but a very, very fondly remembered period for the club, and thanks very much for taking the time to have a chat through, and also thanks for everything you did for the club during those years, because it was a golden period for the club. Hopefully Michael's bringing some good times back now as well.
Well, if he does, there'll be nobody happier than Keith and I pretty much I guarantee that.
One of the first results I look for. And also, John, just to mention to yourself, thanks for your support as when you were leading the paper and things like that. That was, again, always important to get some support locally as well around you. And you were always there for me as a manager, and obviously when John was about as well. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that, Keith. Thank you. Yeah. Always a pleasure. Well, John was the first Cheltenham manager that I dealt with as a sports journalist at Cheltenham, so he was couldn't have been more welcoming himself. So appreciated that as well. Made it a lot easier for me. Taking over from Derek.
Yeah. Fine, Derek. Good man. Yeah, nice one, John. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And Richard, thank you.
Brilliant.
And Wardy, I'll catch up soon.